After you did your apprenticeship, you were issued some sort of certificate from the doctor, and at that point, you were free to practice. And in fact, that's what many people did. Universities came into play in that after you've done several years of practice on the frontier, you might crave a little academic training, and usually you went to Europe, Edinburgh, Leiden, Paris, places like that, would go to lectures, maybe a year or two, take an exam, and you would be given a medical doctor's degree. The first medical degree that was issued in Pennsylvania was from what was the Philadelphia Hospital, later to become the University of Pennsylvania, was in 1790. And this is actually a copy of an original diploma from that class with the same people signing it. I put my name in all the appropriate slots, which is in Latin. So my William is Guilliamus, and this is the true seal that was used at that point of it. There's a lecture taken over here for a school class. You had to have those to be admitted to the lectures. You paid for the tickets and took your lectures. This is another example of how you got some experience. This is a surgeon's commission in the American Army during the Revolution. And again, these are all facsimiles of the actual credentials. I've just added my own dates and name for them. But so if you want to know how they're educated, this is how. More or less by the seat of their pants, and then usually would try to complete their education with something academic, so they could be a medical doctor and have a degree later on. Now, the tables here, and you may want to stand back so everybody can see the tables a little bit, represent some of the major things that frontier doctors did. Now, the frontier doctor, he was the jack of all trades. He was the surgeon. He was the apothecary. He was the dentist. He was the internist, the orthopedist. And this represents kind of his trade here. Two things that were biggest in terms of operations, they called capital operations. One was amputation, and that was for limbs that were damaged beyond healing pretty much on their own. So on the frontier, you had all kinds of heavy stuff going on. Barrels, kegs, horses, oxen. You could get kicked, stomped on, fall. Lots of ways to have major injuries. And if you were so mangled that you knew you were going to get infected and die, the arm would come off. If you had a compound fracture, bones through the skin, they could be reset, but almost always they got infected too. So that was another reason you got amputated. Amputation gave you an unmangled unmangled limb and a fresh, clean surface to heal up under your administrations. Had no anesthesia until the 1840s, when ether and chloroform came to the forefront. Prior to that, your surgeon was fast. The faster the better. He had strong assistants, held down the patient, and the patient had to deal with the pain any way he could. The leather strap back there was his main anesthesia. You hear people talk about biting the bullet, and it's thought somewhere, somehow, people would put a bullet in there and bite instead of a strap. A lot of controversy about that, except I have in the collection I donated to Conica Jig a half dozen chewed bullets that looked like chewing gum. Somebody had those in their mouth, and somebody was upset enough to squish them. I've had a musket ball in my mouth, tried to do something like that to it. I'd scratch it, make little dents, that's it. So, whatever. I believe it probably did do that. I just don't have any sources that prove it other than my bullets. Alcohol, narcotic like opium, laudanum, which they had, were used after the operation for pain control. They were not anesthetics. If you use alcohol, and if you've been to a party where there's alcohol, the first thing the alcohol does is get you excited, which is not what you want when you're trying to cut on somebody. The second thing is alcohol in the blood, and you don't want that. The opium, you can be put to sleep with opium, but it's a permanent sleep. By the time you have enough anesthesia there to make you go to sleep, you stop breathing. And also narcotics, for a lot of people, if they get enough, they start to vomit. Again, something you really don't want when you're taking off a limb.